Well, this year, unemployment among Black women has increased significantly, rising from 5.4% in January to 7.7% in September. In April alone, over 106,000 Black women lost their jobs. The disparity in unemployment rates between Black women and other groups is widening faster than it has since 2020. The NAACP asserts that this trend is not merely a result of bad luck or market forces. Karen Boykin Towns, Vice Chair of the NAACP National Board of Directors, is here to discuss the economic challenges that are faced by more than 600,000 Black women who have been sidelined.
Quite frankly, I don't know about you, but I have a number of friends who have been impacted, and it's not because they have done a bad job. It's not because they have decided to leave. It seems like it's a systemic disinvestment where they are being impacted due to nothing that they have done other than a lack of being undervalued, and just the times that we have found ourselves in where we have policies that are going against the progress that we've made, where we've had government shutdowns and massive layoffs, and where corporations have walked away from commitments that they have made. And so here we find ourselves.
So apparently, we now reached the point where people will blame literally anything except their own behavior for why they can't get hired. And I mean anything. And we're going to talk about how an alleged HR specialist, someone whose entire job is to understand hiring, going online and claiming that 500,000 Black women are unemployed, not because of performance, not because of professionalism, but because of discrimination. And I got to tell you, when I watched this, it's mind blowing. Not just because of what she said, but because of what it reveals about the mindset behind it. According to her, employers just don't want to hire Black women anymore. That's the claim. That's the narrative being pushed. And of course, the implication is pretty clear. It must be racism. It must be bias. It must be systemic. It couldn't possibly be anything else. It couldn't be workplace behavior. It couldn't be attitude. It couldn't be communication style. No, it has to be oppression. And that right there is the part we need to talk about, because when you actually listen to her explanation, and we're going to break it down, and you start to realize something pretty quickly, this isn't really about discrimination. This is about a lack of self-awareness. This is about people refusing to look in the mirror and ask, hey, could I be a part of the problem? And instead of defaulting to a narrative that removes all personal responsibility, um, that's dangerous, not just for individuals, but for an entire culture. Now, look, this is a sensitive topic, and I'm not here to throw insults or make this personal. What I am here to do is analyze the argument, break it down, and have a real conversation about what's actually happening. And most importantly, why this kind of thinking is not helping the very people it claims to defend. Because at the end of the day, if you keep telling people that the system is always against them and they're always the victim and they run in the victim Olympics and nothing is ever their fault, you're not empowering them. You're handicapping them and you're setting them up to fail. So in this video, we're going to look at what she says. We're going to unpack the logic behind it, because I always like to understand people and why they say and why they do what they want to do. I guess that's the favoritism of psychology on my end there. But also, I was just raised where my father always told me, just listen to how a person talk long enough and you will understand how they are. And we're going to talk about what's really going on here, because I promise you the truth is a lot less convenient than the narrative. But hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel. And now I want you guys to check this out.
The reason why there's over 500,000 Black women that are getting laid off and having a hard time finding a job is because these companies no longer want to deal with any more racism and discrimination cases. Now, I worked in HR for over 10 years, and I was actually let go because I took a look at our budget report and saw the pay differential between our white and Black employees, and I exposed everything was ultimately let go. Now, being an HR girly, you're well connected with other women in HR at different companies, and a lot of us had the same experience. We would receive a lot of discrimination cases from Black women in leadership positions. Now, keep in mind, these companies were required to maintain a certain amount of Black and brown staff members at one point, and a lot of these women were ending up in management positions. Black women were at the top of their game for a while. But if they began to be a company nuisance, they would do anything to get their ass out of the door. And when I say a company nuisance, that means reporting discrimination, reporting racism. As soon as you do it, there is a target on your back. These companies will hold meetings with the top management and HR and say, hey, this person's becoming a company nuisance. They're affecting the company morale. What can we do to shorten their time with this company? At which point we would go through all the policies, procedures, your performance, the company handbook, and see if there is anything that they can do to get your ass up out of there. Things like you might have been able to be 15 minutes late consistently due to traffic before, but now they on your ass about your punctuality.
Okay. There's so much there's so much packed into what she just said. And that it's honestly hard to know where to start because in trying to defend the situation, she actually ends up admitting the exact problem. And that's what makes this so revealing because first off, let's deal with the basics here. She's talking about people coming into work 15 minutes late consistently every single day as if that's something that should just be tolerated, like it's some kind of workplace privilege. No, that's not how any functioning workplace operates. If you are late every day, you are not reliable. It doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, or what your background is. Employers are not running charities, they are running businesses. And reliability is the bare minimum expectation. And then she brings up people wearing bonnets. I want you guys to hear this.
You might have been able to come into the office with a bonnet every now and then because you're having a bad hair day.
Okay. Wearing bonnets to work and frames the backlash as some kind of injustice. Again, this is not complicated. Most workplaces have standards for a reason. Professional environments expect a certain level of presentation because you are representing the company, whether you like it or not. So when you show up late and when you show up dressed in a way that clearly doesn't meet those standards, and then you act surprised when there are consequences, that's not discrimination. That's cause and effect. But really, what really stands out to me is what she indirectly admits about behavior in the workplace because she describes situations where people get involved in things that have nothing to do with the actual job responsibilities.
And now you out of dress code. They would look for little things to just target you to make it seem like you are not performing well on the job. And obviously, we know that it's retaliation. They know that it's retaliation, but good luck proving that it's retaliation. These companies know that only about 2% of retaliation cases are even going to go anywhere. And before it's all said and done, you're probably going to go broke in lawyer fees and probably just get a really small settlement either way, but you still ain't got no job. And you're not going to get a good referral. They're not going to give you a good referral to another company, actually. Now the DEI is over with and they don't have to hire a certain amount of black and brown people to keep their shareholders happy, discrimination cases are way down. They're able to use their HR staff to focus in on other claims and other cases. If they reduce the amount of black women that they keep in the office, they don't have to deal with the whole angry black woman stereotype. They don't have to deal with the discrimination cases. They don't have to really deal with the racism cases. And I mean, there are some, but it's a way smaller percentage than it was a couple of years ago.
All right. So, look, this is wild to me because she's describing situations where people get involved in things that have nothing to do with the actual job responsibilities, like checking other people's salaries, stirring up conflict, making accusations, and then acting shocked when that leads to termination. That's not being targeted. That's being disruptive. That's being, quite frankly, an agent of chaos in an environment that depends on order, structure, and focus. And this ties directly into a bigger point that I'm making, right? If you are an employer and you are looking to minimize risk, you want people to show up on time, do their job, and don't create unnecessary problems. So when someone comes in with a mindset that everything is political, that every perceived slight is discrimination, that every disagreement is some form of oppression, that person becomes a liability, okay? Not because of their identity, but because of their behavior. Because now you're not just managing their job performance, you are managing potential conflict, HR complaints, internal division, reputational risk. And that's exactly what she's describing. Whether she realizes it or not, she's talking about she investigated pay differences working in HR. And she doing this video on how she worked in HR, immediately jumping into the conclusion that it must be racism. And then broadcasting the narrative on TikTok. But instead of reflecting and asking, was that appropriate? Was that my role in her case? This wasn't part of her job requirement to sit here and blast her job and the requirements and things she's seen being in HR, where there's confidential information amongst employers, and she worked in that department, and now she's over here calling herself blasting this information on TikTok. So now I'm asking her, is this appropriate? Was this her role? Did she handle this professionally? The conclusion is I got fired because they couldn't handle the truth. That's what she's saying. She's saying I got fired because they couldn't handle the truth. No. Sometimes maybe you get fired because you crossed the line. It has nothing to do with your job. In this case, her doing this on TikTok has nothing to do with her job and created a problem that didn't need to exist. That's all I'm saying. Is analyzing what she's doing and what she's talking about. And this is where the lack of self-awareness really becomes the issue. Because if the default explanation for every negative outcome is racism or discrimination in her case, then there's no room for growth and there's no accountability, right? There's no difference between if you dating someone and then every time you try to make a point, they can't acknowledge what you're saying, but they quick to be an agent of chaos because they quick to respond because they listening to respond back to you. Because you can sit there and say, oh, well, this is just an example, right? You could sit there, fellas or ladies, whatever. You could be talking to your man or fellas, you could be talking to your lady, and you could sit there and say, um, yeah, we agreed to, chill out and watch a movie and so forth. And she responds, oh, but you never told me what movie. But the reality was she never acknowledged the simple fact that y'all have agreed on a time to watch a movie. And the whole thing is, why be an agent of chaos and making it so difficult when y'all actually took the time to actually sit there and carve out the time and actually honor what you said when the time was designated for us to watch the movie? We could have easily picked what movie we was gonna watch. So that doesn't absolve us from the simple fact that we agreed to watch a movie. So now you being an agent of chaos, being disruptive with this bad behavior or this combative behavior, which is a form of being an agent of chaos, and then you think somebody's supposed to put up with that? How you think businesses feel in her case, right? And she's exposing things allegedly, as she allegedly was an HR specialist, and she's sitting on this TikTok talking about this. She could have talked about anything else, right? So what I'm saying is there's no correction of behavior on her part. And without those things, and that begs a bigger question. When you act like this with no responsibility, no accountability, and you think and you speak in the Victim Olympics of saying you got fired, like she's saying, or individuals are getting fired because of discrimination, but there's no correction of behavior on her end or individual's end. Without those things, nothing improves. And here's the uncomfortable reality that people don't want to say out loud. When certain behaviors become predictable, chronic lateness, unprofessional presentation, bringing political grievances into the workplace, escalating everything into a conflict, just like I mentioned as an example, just to bring it down to a real world example, what I say with the relationship, because escalating everything to a conflict in a relationship is the same thing in the workplace. Employers start to associate those behaviors with risk. So it's a risk for your relationship because nothing gets solved and it's just constantly back and forth with nothing, no understanding to improve the relationship, to get a better understanding on how it's landing on each other, how y'all perceiving things. So y'all can make sure y'all communicating effectively in the relationship example I gave you. So y'all can improve on y'all better understanding to be on the same page. It's no different with a company. So when it comes to in the workplace, right? You want to keep escalating everything to a conflict? Bye. They're not going to deal with you. Why would they keep talking to you? The same way, fellas, if you with your woman and she keep escalating everything to something that's not big at all, and you just saying, hey, you supposed to watch a movie, you ain't going to want to deal with her. She ain't peaceful. And it's the same thing that go for a female. If her man keep always responding, everything is a conflict, he comes off feminine. Nobody want to deal with that. Right? So I'm saying all this to say, they are not sitting around as a company speaking to her in this video. They're not sitting around plotting discrimination, but because they're trying to avoid headaches. Do you not understand that? Just like a person would in a relationship, right? They're trying to protect their business. The same way in a relationship example, they want to protect their peace, right? Because Love comes as patient, kind, and peaceful. So when she makes this video, what she thinks is a defense actually ends up reinforcing the exact concerns employers have, that hiring someone who brings this mindset into the workplace is going to create more problems than it solves. And again, that's not about hate or bigotry. That's about practicality. That's about business. From a business perspective, if people don't start recognizing that, they're going to keep running into the same outcomes and blaming the wrong cause every single time.
And so now when you see all these black women saying that they're not getting callbacks, they're not able to find a job where it was easy for them just a little while ago, you understand that they wore out that whole discrimination and racism thing with these companies to the point where they are only keeping a very small percentage of black women, and they have to move a certain type of way to even be able to keep that damn job, because they will replace your ass with a white woman quick as hell.
But the world, I can't stand divisive rhetoric. Why can't we just spread peace, love, and positivity? But speaking to what she's saying, like I've been doing this whole video. I mean, yeah, why? Why would any employer go out their way to give a glowing recommendation to someone who, by their own admission, was showing up late, disregarding basic professional standards, and actively accusing the company of racism? That's not a minor issue. That's a direct threat to the company's reputation and internal stability. And I'm trying to figure out what the expectation is here. You come into a workplace, you consistently violate expectations, you make serious accusations, many of which are unsubstantiated, and then on your way out, you expect the same company to vouch for you? That doesn't make sense in the real world. Because here's the thing people don't talk about enough. Your professional representation doesn't just exist in a vacuum. Companies talk, industries are smaller than people think, and references matter. And when an employer is asked about a former employee, they are not just thinking about being nice, they're thinking about liability, credibility in their own brand. If they recommended someone who they know is disruptive, unreliable, or prone to making serious accusations without evidence that reflects back on them and it puts their integrity on the line. Now let's take a step further, right? Let's take it a step further. From a legal and operational standpoint, accusations of racism are not small claims. Those are serious allegations that can trigger investigations, lawsuits, public backlash, and long term reputational damage. So if you are an employee who casually throws those accusations around in situations when they are not warranted, you're not just speaking your truth. You're creating a risk, significant risk, and no company is going to reward that behavior with a positive recommendation, because doing so would essentially be endorsing someone who could bring that same chaos into another organization. And this is where the broader principle of accountability comes in. And honestly, this ties directly into how our system is supposed to function. When we live in a country that values individual responsibility, and that's not just a cultural idea, it's rooted in the framework of the founders laid out. The Constitution doesn't guarantee outcomes, it guarantees opportunity. And with that opportunity comes the expectation that individuals conduct themselves in a way that earns trust, builds credibility, and contributes to order rather than undermining it. And when you look at how workplaces function, it's really just a small version of that same idea. There are standards, there are expectations, there are consequences. If you meet the standards, you advance. If you don't, there are repercussions. And that's not oppression, that's structure. That's how any stable system operates. Now, to be fair, there are people who will argue that workplaces can have bias, that discrimination does exist, and that employees should feel empowered to speak up when something is genuinely wrong. And that's true. Two things can be true at the same time. There are legal protections in place for a reason, but those protections are meant to address um, real issues, right? Real, how can I put this? Demonstrable issues, not to be used as a blanket explanation for every negative outcome or as a shield against personal accountability. Because when that line gets blurred, when every critique becomes racism and every consequences becomes discrimination, you dilute the seriousness of actual discrimination claims and make it harder to identify real injustice while also damaging your own credibility. At the end of the day, employers are not making decisions based on ideology. They're making decisions based on risk, performance, and reliability. And if someone demonstrates through their own actions that they are more likely to create conflict than contribute value, then yes, that's going to follow them, not because of who they are, but because of what they've shown. And expecting anything different, especially expecting a positive recommendation after that kind of track record, just isn't grounded in reality. Right. So, and she also admitted something here that I don't think she even realized she's saying out loud, which is that a lot of these people are being hired not based on qualifications, but based on identity, based on quotas, based on DEI initiatives rather than actual merit. And that's the part that really makes you stop and say, wait a second. What an admission. You mean to tell me that DEI wasn't worth it? That's what she's saying? You mean to tell me that prioritizing identity over competence, hiring people because of how they look instead of what they actually can do, didn't work out the way it was promised? I'm just asking the question that instead of creating better workplaces, it created more problems, more conflict, and in many cases, less productivity. That's what she's describing here. Let me know if I'm wrong in the comments, whether she intends to or not, because if the end result of these hiring practices is employees who are consistently late, who don't meet professional standards, who bring political grievances in the workplace, and who create internal disruption, then yeah, companies are going to reassess that. They're going to look at it and say that this is more trouble than it's worth. Now that many of these companies are starting to pull back from these policies, what are we seeing? Are we seeing a shift back towards focusing on the bottom line? We're seeing companies prioritize reliability, skill, and performance again, because at the end of the day, that's what keeps the lights on. Businesses exist to generate value, not to serve as platforms for political activism. So when you remove the pressure to hire based on identity and you go back to hiring based on merit, of course, you're going to see different outcomes. And of course, the people who benefited from those previous systems are going to notice that shift. But again, this is what I've been warning, right? When you constantly play the race card, when every situation becomes an accusation, when every disagreement becomes discrimination, people eventually start to see that as a risk. They start to say, this is not something we want to deal with. Not out of hate, not out of bias, but out of practicality, out of a desire to avoid unnecessary problems. And the same thing applies more broadly to political behavior in the workplace. If someone is known for bringing activism into their job, for creating tension over political issues, for potentially discriminating against others based on their beliefs, that's going to factor into hiring decisions, especially in customer facing roles, especially in team environments where cohesion actually matters. And look at the bigger picture right now. We are in a time where certain industries are tightening up, where layoffs are happening, and where companies are being more selective. And in that kind of environment, that the people who are going to struggle the most are the ones who don't bring clear value and who come in with who come with added risk. And if your skill set isn't strong and your record suggests you might create headaches, yeah, it's going to be harder to get hired. That's not discrimination. That's basic economics. That's not discrimination. That's how the market works. So when you step back and look at everything she said, it doesn't support the narrative she's trying to push. It actually undermines it. It shows that the issue isn't what she claims it is. It's not primarily about racism or systemic bias. It's about behavior, accountability, and the consequences that come with both. And until that reality is acknowledged, people are going to keep running into the same wall, running into the victim Olympics, and wondering why nothing changes. So with that being said, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, share this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on your push notifications so you don't miss any future content. But however, before I close, I want to close with this. My goal, first and foremost, is to be the light and salt of the earth, to bring clarity, truth, and a sense of responsibility into conversations like this, and to do it in a way that reflects both conviction and compassion. And the Bible says in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 40, let all things be done decently and in order. And that principle speaks directly to what we've been discussing, because whether it's in the workplace or in everyday life, order, accountability, and mutual respect are what allow people and systems to function well. While confusion, disorder, and lack of responsibility tend to lead to breakdowns in trust and stability. This isn't about pointing fingers. It's about recognizing that each of us has a role to play in how we show up, how we treat others, and how we carry ourselves in environments that depend on cooperation and structure. And when we approach our responsibilities with integrity, consistency, and a willingness to reflect on our own actions, we contribute to something greater than ourselves. And that's where real progress and unity begin. So the question is, in your own life, in your own environment, are you choosing to bring order, accountability, and respect into the spaces you are a part of, or are you unintentionally contributing to the kind of confusion and division that holds people back? Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Hope you guys got some value from this video. As always, family, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.